And coming up on the wrap tonight, Rand Paul rules Iowa. But how about Hillary? Republicans in Congress are working on a bill that would halt the president's Iran agreement. But will Senate Democrats get in the way? And once again, the Secret Service is in hot water. We discuss all of that, plus yay or nay and potluck. This is the Daily Wrap, live from New York City. And hello and welcome to the Daily Wrap. Joining me tonight, SiriusXM host, Forbes.com columnist, and the human equivalent of a dry, persistent cough.
I don't know what that means, but I don't think I like it.
He's my co-host, Rick Unger, and yes, I stole that line from Letterman. And she is the editor of JaneUnchained.com. I like that. Jane Velez Mitchell makes her debut on the Daily Wrap. And finally, he is the executive editor of Newsmax, and therefore is kind of a big deal. Ken Chandler is here as well.
Well, he thinks so.
Welcome all. Let's go to the Daily Download.
This is the way it's going to be.
And Senator Rand Paul finally getting some good news today, according to a new Quinnipiac swing state poll. Mr. Paul leads the former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton 44 to 41% in Colorado, 43 to 42 in Iowa, and 47 to 43 in Virginia. And here's some interesting data on Mrs. Clinton. The same poll asked respondents if Hillary was honest and trustworthy or not. The email scandal certainly taking its toll on her in Colorado. Only 38% finding Clinton honest and trustworthy, and a whopping 56% not so much. In Iowa, 43% find her honest and trustworthy, and 49% do not. In Virginia, 52% find her not honest and trustworthy. Are we seeing a theme here? Rick, at some point, we're starting to see the effects of the email scandal having an effect, at least on the trust factor. The question is, will this make a difference in whether people actually vote for her or not?
You know, it's so interesting. I find Virginia fascinating because, as you correctly pointed out, she doesn't do very well on the whole trust thing. In fact, she's down from a month ago. She's doing worse. But guess what? Her numbers are up overall against Republican candidates. Against Jeb Bush, who she was tied with at 42-42, she's now 47-40.
Can I explain this for you, Rick?
Please.
Okay.
Please.
Northern Virginia. What do people do in Northern Virginia?
Absolutely.
They work in D.C.
Absolutely.
A Democratic president is much better for jobs in Northern Virginia than a Republican.
But how do you explain that versus last month? She's actually improved 5 points, but her trustworthy numbers are worse.
Well, I'd like to jump in as a woman and say that I think what's happening to Hillary Clinton is right up there with the Salem witch trials. As she has a target on her back, and everybody's out to get her for different reasons. The media is out to get her because they don't want a coronation. That's bad television, bad ratings. Progressives, well, they want Elizabeth Warren to run. And, of course, the Republicans want her to be involved in some kind of slugfest to weaken her so she doesn't waltz to the nomination with all that money and cash to use on Republicans. So basically, everybody but her core constituency is attacking her, and I don't think it's fair, and I think it's dangerous because a lot of women, like me, might relate to that kind of situation where you're damned if you do and damned if you don't, and they might be sort of empathizing with what Hillary's going through right now.
That's interesting that you bring up attack and that everybody's going after her. I agree with what you say about the media part. Nobody wants to see Hillary go unchallenged to the nomination and then win by 10 points in the general, which would never happen. But these are self-inflicted wounds. She didn't have to put an email server in Chappaqua.
Are they important? Yeah, but yet she's probably got the only email server that hasn't been hacked. We talked about this last night.
And to have
State
that foresight is
Department was
amazing.
hacked. The White House was hacked. For all we know, Hillary was the smart one. Hers weren't hacked so far as we know.
What a crystal ball.
Listen, I think more importantly, we've learned something. We talked about before the show. We don't know where Jane sits on these things. We now know she's on the right side.
Well, listen, I think it's a ginned-up controversy. I mean, email. She did submit something like 30,000 emails for review. Okay, so she was using the wrong cell phone. You know, BFD. I mean, it's not equivalent to, let's say, invading a country under false pretenses, saying that there's weapons of mass destruction when there aren't. That's what I'd call a real scandal.
Okay, so to the trust factor point, Bill Clinton, obviously, late in his presidency, post-Monica, his approval ratings go to somewhere around 70%. And obviously nobody trusted him with, you know, you don't know the definition of the word is, and he lied under oath, and he was actually impeached, and all these things. No, but I'm making a point. Yeah. The point is that nobody cared. Right? And I wonder, Ken, how much trust really plays a role in people's decisions in voting for somebody or not. It used to play a very big role. Now I don't get that feeling.
Not so much. I think it's more about competence. I think if people, I think there's a sort of factor that you build in that politicians, they're not quite like you and I. They do stuff. That's what they do. And I think you look at Hillary Clinton and you think, you imagine if she was in the White House, would she be a good president? Forget the emails, forget all the other scandals. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, that's what they're going to decide.
That's right. That's how people actually think.
And I think there's no foil as well, Jane. I think, in other words, on the Republican side, you can't look at somebody necessarily, the bigger candidates that have announced, or at least are going to announce, and say, oh, there's somebody I could definitely trust. That's an upstanding individual. Maybe Jeb Bush fits that role, however.
I don't think Jeb Bush fits that role. I mean, he has said publicly that he doesn't think his success has anything to do with his family name. Hello? I mean, delusional at the very least. So I don't necessarily, while he may come off as sort of Mayberry wholesome, I don't think that necessarily equates to being trustworthy, because we all know today that people can put on a pretty good wholesome act. They even have a school for that, I think, in the nation's capital.
But can I make a point? This is like all noise. People are not really paying attention to this. They hear little bits and pieces about email scandals and
they won't
Jeb pretending to be a Hispanic. But they're not going to remember this when they go to vote in 18 months' time.
It is, yeah. It's even more. I think it's 20 months from now.
But what are we going to do between now and then if we don't talk about it?
We'll talk about it.
Well, we'll talk about it. It's the point of the show. Anyway, let's talk about Senator Rand Paul. The media has not been very kind to Mr. Paul. Here he is yesterday on the Today Show with Savannah Guthrie.
You have had views in the past on foreign policy that are somewhat unorthodox, but you seem to have changed over the years. You once said Iran was not a threat. Now you say it is. You once proposed ending foreign aid to Israel. You now support it, at least for the time being. And you once offered to drastically cut. Once drastically wanted to cut defense spending, and now you want to increase it 16%. So I just wonder if you've mellowed out.
Oh, you wanted more of that exchange. Ask and you shall receive.
I think we know
why don't you let me explain instead of talking over me, okay? Before we go through a litany of things you say I've changed on, why don't you ask me a question? Have I changed my opinion on? That would be sort of a better way to approach an interview.
Okay.
No.
Is Iran still not a threat?
You've editorialized. No. Listen. You've editorialized. Let me answer a question. You ask a question and you say, have your views changed, instead of editorializing and saying my views have changed.
Okay, quickly.
Okay, so
fair, unfair?
Unfair. What's the big deal about someone changing their mind? I mean, I wish more politicians were honest enough to say, yeah, I was wrong, I've changed my opinion.
Just say that instead of attacking her.
Ken, actually, that will be the last and only word. Yes, people are allowed to change their mind. I've heard about Hillary Clinton, for instance, evolving on gay marriage. It does happen. Anyway, when we come back, more Daily Wrap. This is Newsmax TV. And welcome back. I'm Joe Concha, along with my co-host and beer pong partner, Rick Unger. We're now joined by also Ken Chandler and Jane Velez Mitchell. Democrats now revolting against a bill that would allow Congress to be a part of a pending deal with Iran over its nuclear program, siding with the president that the bill would derail the proceedings. If passed, the Corker-Menendez bill would suspend Mr. Obama's authority to temporarily lift sanctions for 65 days, pending a congressional vote to approve or disapprove said final deal. House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi saying in a statement, and we got quotes, diplomacy has taken us to a framework agreement founded on vigilance and enforcement, and these negotiations must be allowed to proceed unencumbered. Meanwhile, Senator Corker telling Fox News there should be no problem getting Congress involved in a potential deal with Iran. We have no audio in here.
Have any effect on this deal. As a matter of fact, what we know is just quite the contrary. We know that during the negotiations, the fact that Congress was likely to weigh in was something that the administration, the other Western countries were able to use to ensure that this deal isn't worse than it is.
And let's hear a little bit more from Mr. Corker.
If the president feels like this is something that's good for the nation, surely he can sell this to the United States Senate and the House.
Okay, so let's bring in Newsmax White House correspondent and Newsmax chief political columnist John Gizzi. John, Senator Corker is considered a centrist. Do you think that he'll be able to work with the president on this and Senate Democrats?
Yes, I do, but there's also the fact that events are moving at an almost quicksilver speed, Joe. He's going to have a committee hearing on Tuesday. It's an open amendment process. That means that any measures can be put on the Corker Amendment. Senator Coons of Delaware, Senator Murphy of Connecticut, both have amendments that would water down the legislation or strip out key parts. For example, the idea that the president has to certify to Congress that Iran is directly involved in terrorist actions. Senator Coons wants to take that out completely. Now, all of this is a Trust Tehran initiative. That's what I call it, and that's what a lot of others say. I would have some questions whether this could pass the full committee, and then there will be an up and down vote in the Senate on Tuesday afternoon. So my money is on the Corker Amendment as it is, being enacted without amendments.
John, it's Rick Unger. Enacted by how many votes? Because I think we get to the next question. I think you're right, by the way. I think it will pass. But then we get to the question of what happens if the president decides to veto it. Can Senator Schumer, who is joining with Corker on this, will he bring enough Democrats to override a veto?
As of today, and mind you, Rick, this is difficult because Congress is out of session,
Yes.
but as of today,
What a surprise.
it seems as though support for the Corker Amendment is growing. Senator Menendez, of course, was an early backer.
Right.
And the phrase that I keep hearing is perilously close to a veto-proof majority.
Yeah. Interesting.
John, when this gets to January 30th or so, when the final agreement is supposed to come into place, do you think that we actually will have a signed agreement between Iran and the United States on their nuclear program? And will economic sanctions be lifted day one as the Ayatollah is demanding?
First of all, the Ayatollah on his website says exactly the opposite of what Press Secretary Josh Earnest tells us on an almost daily basis at the White House, that the sanctions would be lifted gradually with the president weighing them and putting a waiver on the sanctions as Congress empowered him when they originally passed the measure. Now, this raises another issue that many of the Iranian exiles opposed to the Tehran regime point out, and that is that the Ayatollah has to sign off on any agreement that emerges from these talks, that President Rouhani is simply a spokesman for the government. It's the Ayatollah Khamenei who has the last words. And if you look at his website today, he's a little more skeptical about it. The whole idea that all sanctions would be lifted on the day that an agreement comes down, if it does, is just out of the question, according to the president's own top spokesman.
Well, the Ayatollah seems like a pretty reasonable guy, so I can't see what could possibly go wrong here. We're going bowling next week, as a matter of fact, so that should be fun. John Gizzi from Washington, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Look forward to coming back.
Take care,
Absolutely.
guys.
So, levity aside, that's kind of a sticking point, Rick Unger. Hey, we want them lifted day one. No, we need to be able to verify first. That's a wide gap.
Aside from the absolute comedic bliss I get out of the concept of the Ayatollah sitting there tweeting, which is what this did. It came out on Twitter. Look, politics is a worldwide sport, folks. This guy is a politician in his country like our politicians are in ours. Yesterday, there was a story saying that the hardliners over in Iran are buying into the agreement, right? Now you got the Ayatollah going the other way. They're playing the same games that we're playing here with Congress. I don't know where it all ends up, but it's all politics.
Right, but I mean, I'm more interested actually in the dilemma that Senator Chuck Schumer finds himself in, because he is likely the next Senate leader. And, you know, obviously he doesn't want to upset the White House, but he has a very strong pro-Israel constituency that he has to take care of here in New York. So, I mean, this is a real dilemma for him. I mean, this is going to be a test of his skills, I think.
But he's picked his side.
He has picked
And
his
actually,
side.
to his credit, he has not hedged. He picked his side.
Well, he hasn't hedged yet.
That's true.
Right, boy, I hope he has a good chiropractor.
You know, I was just in Israel, and I could certainly understand the terror of the thought of Iran getting nuclear weapons, and it's certainly something a lot of people were talking about there. But by the same token, I've known Iranians who've escaped and been exiled from Iran, and I know that they've told me that there are sizable populations within Iran who want to return to the world community. So obviously, the most important thing is making sure they don't get the weapon. But if we can do that and somehow allow this country to re-enter the world community, that would be a good thing for trade. It would also be a good thing for the good people, not the demonic leaders, and I believe that they are demonic, but the good people of Iran who really have suffered unimaginably under this really freakish, bizarre rule.
Yeah, it's been totalitarian almost. We almost forget, obviously, all those protests in Tehran and all those people that were killed there because they tried to have a democratic uprising and it got squashed in a hurry. To Jane's point, that's still very much that government.
No question that's the case. One thing to keep an eye out, though, there is some scuttlebutt here and there that if the Ayatollah, I am told, might be very ill. He might be suffering from liver cancer.
Hope.
Well, if that should come to be the case and he passes away, there are those who believe that the army will rise up in a coup and things will change.
Wow, Jane getting revenge. The Ayatollah was saying death to America. Now Jane's saying death to the Ayatollah. And we'll see you on YouTube. So, coming up next, does the leader of the free world have an anti-Christian bias? We'll discuss that after the break. This is the Daily Wrap, only on Newsmax.
On Easter, I do reflect on the fact that as a Christian, I am supposed to love. And I have to say that sometimes when I listen to less than loving expressions by Christians, I get concerned. But that's a topic for another day.
And welcome back to the Daily Wrap. That was President Obama at a prayer breakfast on Tuesday, raising some eyebrows with those remarks. And if you go to Newsmax.com right now, you'll see a well-written, reasoned story about some critics of the president believing that he is, in fact, anti-Christian. And this isn't the first time he's angered those of the faith. Here's Mr. Obama back in February.
Remember that during the Crusades and the Inquisition, people committed terrible deeds in the name of Christ. In our home country, slavery and Jim Crow all too often was justified in the name of Christ.
Now remember that the president has said repeatedly that terrorism committed by Al-Qaeda and ISIS is not done in the name of religion.
Now let's make two things clear. ISIL is not Islamic. No religion condones the killing of innocents.
And there's been criticism that the president is tough on Christians, but tiptoes very carefully when speaking about followers of Islam. Rick, I know you have some thoughts on whether this is a controversy or a nothing burger.
It's a controversy, but it's a despicable controversy. You know, you listen to the first thing that the president said there. Did he say anything that wasn't true? Absolutely not. There are Christians, all of us. We all sin. Even Bill O'Reilly said that. And that's what he was pointing out. But I want to highlight my favorite. And this is right out of an article that was in Newsmax today. Bill Donohue, who is the president of the Catholic League, said the following. I know secular-minded people. He, referring to the president, is certainly one of them. I don't believe he's a Christian, and I don't believe he's a Muslim. He believes in nothing, stands for nothing, and he's good for nothing. That is exactly what President Obama was talking about when he made that speech. Here is a guy, I'm no religious scholar, but I do remember the part where it says, judge not, lest ye be judged. Who the heck is Bill Donohue to measure the depth of Barack Obama's religion? Who is he? Obama stood before you all and said he's a Christian. How does Bill Donohue get to say that he's not up to his standards as a Christian?
Does that mean he, according to Donohue's definition, does that make him an atheist or agnostic? I never know the difference.
It makes Bill Donohue a total, you-know-what, hypocrite.
Interesting. Ken?
I don't know who's giving President Obama advice to go there.
Yeah.
I just don't see the point. I don't see the value. I don't understand what the point is in any of the stuff that he's saying, because it's true.
Well, he was talking on an Easter service.
I understand that, but you can say that about any religion. I mean,
Yes,
there's people
you can.
from any religion, but why single out Christians especially at Easter and at a time when Christians are being persecuted in the Middle East? I mean,
agree with you.
it's a no-win, and I don't understand it.
100%. The reason is that it's a trap for him. I mean, there's a reason we don't talk about religion at the dinner table, because it usually results in arguments. And he knows that religion, whether it's the Reverend Wright, what have you, has always been a minefield for him. So why is he going there? I really think that all of this kind of conversations are a trap, and government should really evolve past that. I'd like to see a Mark Zuckerberg for president. Would he be having these kinds of conversations? No. He'd be talking about
he'd be
solutionary.
criticized for not.
No, but he'd be talking about solutionary approaches. CEOs don't sit around generally, unless they're, Hobby Lobby, talking about religion. Let's bring business back into government and take all the gobbledygook out. And this is part of the problem. He's falling into a trap.
I agree with that completely. There's no place for religion when it comes to government. I agree. But if you don't get to judge a human being, I don't care if Barack Obama is president of the United States or selling tickets at Yankee Stadium. You don't get to judge that way, especially when you're judging saying he's not a Christian because I say so.
Yeah, but life's not fair.
So,
and
it's
Obama
wrong.
should know, the president should know better, knowing that he's falling into a trap.
I think Jay makes a great point that this is about timing. And when Christians are being beheaded by ISIS, maybe.
Well, you know what? And Jews are being killed in synagogues in Europe, and Muslims are being killed by Muslims in the Middle East. And so why all of a sudden?
So why doesn't he go and give a speech about
because
Muslims?
I want to know why Christians are suddenly so, or not all Christians, most Christians get it, why these people are suddenly so upset and saying that he's anti-Christian. Where were they when Jews were being blown up in synagogues? Were they saying that they didn't say a word, did they?
Rick, I think this began, and this was about 2 months ago, when he compared the Crusades to ISIS, and he had to go all the way back 500 years to find Christians killing people
he also
in the name
talked
of
about,
religion.
and it was that second speech, he talked about the what happened in Spain, the insurrection. The Inquisition. I'm sorry. And I got to tell you
Mel
something.
Brooks, had a song about it.
As somebody whose ancestors were on those racks, I took his point.
But I'm saying he didn't have to reach back 500 years to try to equate Christianity with ISIS killing
something. All he's trying to say is don't hate your neighbor because they're not you. We all have dirt on our
But you have to admit,
hands.
from a PR perspective, the reaction has not been good for him.
I think he's
James'
a
point,
human being,
he just kept it out.
And he's
we gotta
a
go.
human being who is upset
Tom.
that the Christian right has been attacking him.
And that's the last word. Potluck time next. This is the Daily Wrap, only on Newsmax. And welcome back to the Daily Wrap. It's potluck time. This is the part of the show where we go around the table and share our favorite stories of the day. Rick Unger, Beauty Before Age.
So this, thank you. This dovetails nicely with the last segment that we did. I have gotten very interested, along with all this anti-Christian talk about the president. We've seen a revival of this conversation about why will he never use the term radical Islam or extremist Islam or violent Islam. So I got curious to see, is there something to this? Is he different than other presidents? And I went looking and I discovered a few fascinating things. Going back to President Reagan, which is really, in my memory at least, the first I recall of experiencing this when our Marines in Lebanon were blown up in their barracks. I went to see if other presidents have been willing to say words like this. You know what I discovered? Absolutely not. They were exactly the same as Barack Obama. Interestingly, it turns out it is actual policy. And who explained that? Elliot Abrams, who worked for Bush in national security. He was the deputy of national security. He explained that, and I'll actually read it to you. Here, he said, a longstanding U.S. policy. Why? Because we were invading two Muslim countries and we were being accused of being at war with Islam. So the administration wanted to make it very clear that we were not at war with Islam and every Muslim in the world. Translation, we don't want to tick off Saudi Arabia because Saudi Arabia follows the Wahhabi sect of Islam, as did Al-Qaeda. But they obviously didn't agree. So this is built-in policy. As a matter of fact, President Bush never used the words.
Which one?
The second.
Okay,
The second.
43.
Never said anything like that until he got to the last 2 months of his term. And in one speech, he used similar words to extremist Islam. Didn't do it until he was almost out of office. So my question to everybody, why do they make this so personal with President Obama when he won't use those words? But I don't recall anybody even writing about it when President Bush didn't use those words. I don't recall anybody even thinking about it when President Reagan was careful not to use those words, or any president since.
Did President Bush stand up on Easter Sunday and make the sort of speech that Obama made?
Well, no, I don't think he did. But
No.
but wait. You can't switch the topic just because of that. We're talking about his failure to use the words radical Islam, not whether he's a Christian or not. That's what I'm talking about here. And it turns out he doesn't use them, but neither did any of the other presidents.
Well, none of the other presidents may not have done that, but do you not think that the war on terrorism hasn't escalated significantly
Sure
since
it has,
then?
but it also has, he didn't escalate
I mean-
during President Bush's term?
Not really.
No,
Seriously?
quite so
No,
much.
9/11,
No.
and then it was
We
very
had
quiet for a
9/11.
long time.
Yeah, but anybody ever hear of Al-Qaeda? Did we only hear about this when
We
Barack
did, but
Obama
they-
became
they-
president?
No,
I think that's part of the problem
Yeah.
is that the Republicans in Congress have attacked everything that
Everything.
Obama has done.
And
if
not
he
just in
said,
Congress.
an apple a day keeps a doctor away, they'd say, oh, you're advocating socialized
Right.
medicine again. So I think that it's better to have a more nuanced approach. For example, with this whole Iran nuke thing, if they agree with them from time to time, then when they say they didn't like the Iran deal, I'd say, well, maybe they have a point.
Much more
but now
credibility.
I know that they're going to say that they don't like the deal no matter what.
I think President Bush would have liked for the Democrats to have been gentler on him.
Oh, I agree
mean,
with that. I
come on.
completely agree. And by the way, I never criticized him for most, but see, it falls under the same category. I didn't like it when people would say that President Bush was evil, that he was trying to avenge the attack on his father, all that.
But they did say it, and the media did
And I
not
didn't
make
like
a big
it.
issue of it.
But, well, no, yeah, they did. They did. But they should have, because it was wrong. But this is just as wrong.
You know what else is wrong?
We
are
got to
biting
move on.
into Jane's time.
Jane, please,
Yeah.
take
Our
it away,
first time
Jane.
guest.
I do feel that the government is generally very unresponsive, and that there are these vast bureaucracies that just march on, and that no matter what we do, we can never get the government's attention. So I was happy to notice that 121,000 people signed a petition against conversion therapy, and the White House then came out and denounced it. So there was actually a cause and effect, and it was all
Not
because
the petition,
this
conversion therapy.
yeah, well,
They denounced, yeah.
yeah, they denounced the conversion therapy, not the petition. And it's all because this young woman, who I guess was originally a young man, was forced into conversion therapy by her parents, and she then committed suicide by throwing herself in front of a semi-truck. And so this is what started the movement, and it's a tragedy what happened to her. I don't believe in conversion therapy, but the thing that's the best thing about it is that you can actually get somewhere by signing a petition, which I do like 3 times a day.
Could you do me a favor? Just define quickly for the folks at home what conversion therapy
Well,
is.
essentially, it's when usually a parent takes their child to a so-called therapist because the child has said they're gay, or their sexual orientation is not what the parent wants. And then a so-called therapist says to them, you're not gay, you're not homosexual, we can stomp this out. And often it's very, very traumatic for the person who is gay or is in that situation that they can't control.
Okay. Well, a petition does work in this situation. The president did say that he will be denouncing it as well. So, good stuff, Jane, for your first time in. Well done. Anyway, when we come back, we have even more potluck dinner for you, including my own. This is the Daily Wrap, and it's only on Newsmax TV. And welcome back to the Daily Wrap. I'm your host, Joe Concha. If you're just joining us, we're in the middle of our potluck, where we're sharing our favorite stories of the day. KC, you are number 3.
Joe, you remember Bridgegate? Okay,
How
that
can I
was the
forget?
scandal that was swirling around Chris Christie, the governor of New Jersey and the potential Republican presidential candidate. You may recall that the Christie administration was accused of closing lanes on the George Washington Bridge and causing a traffic nightmare that ran all the way back to the town of Fort Lee. And this was all allegedly because the mayor of Fort Lee, who's a Democrat, refused to endorse Chris Christie's re-election campaign for governor in 2013. Well, federal regulators have been looking into it all, and according to the New York Times, there could be an indictment coming as early as next week. Now, the Times says that the subpoenas have made it clear that the investigations have expanded beyond the lane closings to include possible conflicts of interest and bribery. So nobody's predicting that Christie is going to be indicted, but some of his aides may be in trouble, including an old political ally of his by the name of David Sampson, who was Christie's man in charge of the Port Authority. So if Sampson were to be indicted, and this is all speculation, it would certainly make it tougher for Christie to shake off the scandal and focus on his presidential race. And it would reinforce what critics have long complained about, that whether or not he actually planned the lane closings, it's something that his staff knew he would like.
And it's just so stupid. When you look back on it, I mean, you knew he was going to win that election. It was just a
Right.
matter of by how much. He wanted to get over 60 because that would be
Right.
impressive in a blue state. But you got this thing won by 30 points, and it's
Right.
just so Sopranos. Now, even if he isn't involved with this, the damage is done. He can't win the presidency. He can't even get off the ground, I don't think.
Well,
Where-
I'm not
who
sure
are
that
his
you can write
allies?
him off just yet. The problem with an investigation is like this is it starts off looking at the lane closures, but then it kind of spreads out.
What's interesting
and
about
who knows where else it's gone.
if it lands at David Sampson, as you're suggesting, and I can certainly understand how that would happen, this opens up a fascinating can of worms, because this is a man who is seriously influential throughout the state of New Jersey, huge power broker, very wealthy attorney. A lot of things can come with that.
Yeah, and if he flips, that's the thing. I mean, Christie has had a lot of loyal supporters and lieutenants, and they've stood by him, and they haven't spilled their guts. But if they start looking at a jail cell or a prison term, they might say, okay, I'm going to talk, I'm going to say everything I know, and then Chris Christie could be in really serious.
Do you think
How long
he
do we
runs-
have to wait?
Rain?
For what?
Do I think he runs?
Till these
Yeah.
indictments might
Well,
come
according
out.
to the New York Times, the indictments are going to be coming out next week.
Next week.
Yeah.
I think
Okay.
he'll wait to see what happens with that.
I think I know what our topics are going to be next week.
Probably.
Yeah.
I was just asking Jane, do you think that he runs?
Do you think
Regardless
he
of what
still
happens, let's say nothing happens.
Yes,
Well,
he
then,
runs.
yes.
He runs.
Yes.
And
And
you get-
if nothing happens, if he comes away unscathed from this, I think he's in a good position.
You think so? Because I don't think
think so.
conservatives trust him. They see him as another Romney.
Yeah, but he can win primaries. I agree with Ken.
I definitely
he does
think
run.
he's going to run, because there was an issue in New Jersey called the pig gestation crates, where the vast majority of voters want to get rid of these horrific, cruel crates, and he he vetoed it, even though most of the people, the vast majority in his state, wanted to see a more humane system of factory farming, and it was all because of Iowa. He was trying to please the power brokers in Iowa, which to me telegraphed absolutely that he is already thinking about
And
running.
as a New Jersey resident, I found that very disappointing.
Yeah.
That really, I'm not an emotional guy. That
I
got
like
to me a
you,
little bit. Well,
and
thank
now
you.
I know that you're a compassionate man.
Thank you, Janie. Anyway, you want to see compassion because it's about to go away. So today, or not today, but at least this month, we're celebrating the 25th anniversary of the release of Goodfellas. Yes, you're that old. Can we play a clip from one of my favorite movies, if not my favorite movie of all time?
Yeah, I'll bring your knife back if they do that. Anyway,
Delicious. Delicious.
thank you. Why don't you get yourself a nice girl?
I
Get
get a
your-
nice one almost every night, Ma.
Yeah, but get yourself a girl so you could settle down.
There was a little bit more of that, but I mean, Pesci's great in that, and De Niro, and obviously Henry Hill, and
Don't forget my friend Paul Sorvino.
Paul Sorvino, Bo Dietl's in that movie for about 5 seconds.
Yeah.
I mean, you could go on and on. You're friends with Paul Sorvino?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know
Yes.
that. Played the perfect mafia boy.
I introduced him to his wife,
Really?
Dee Dee.
A
Yes.
story for another time. But anyway, so that's 25 years ago. And I still can't get over the fact that this movie, a classic, was beaten out for Best Picture by Dances with Wolves. I love Costner. That was just 3 hours of it. And then the wolf gets shot. I talk about animal cruelty. That was depressing enough. And it was a fine movie. But what are you talking about today? What's the movie that you stop every time you see it on cable? It's Goodfellas. Dances with Wolves. I broke into remotes trying to change the channel fast enough. All right, so and then here's what's interesting. I looked it up during the break. I'm like, boy, I bet you Goodfellas really outperformed Dances with Wolves as far as like DVDs and all that other stuff. Dances with Wolves has made $184 million total gross. All right, when you can include everything. Goodfellas only $46 million.
No.
Yeah.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
That is shocking.
I did not see that coming.
No.
So maybe I'm wrong.
What happened?
but-
The mob stole the money?
The mob stole the money.
No,
Great,
you're not
great
wrong.
out from that. Thank
You're
you.
not wrong. You're right.
Anyway, that's Potluck tonight, and when we come back, it's Yay or Nay. This is the Daily Wrap, only on Newsmax. Welcome back to Daily Wrap, where we're still debating how Dances with Moles made 4 times as much money as Goodfellas. Anyway, it's time for Yay or Nay, and first up, President Obama may only have a 45% approval rating here in the U.S. That's according to the Real Clear Politics average. But he's Mr. Popularity in the communist country known as Cuba. According to a new poll commissioned by Univision and the Washington Post, the U.S. president has an 80% approval rating in Cuba. This compared to a 47% approval rating for Fidel Castro and a 44% rating for Raul. Wow, why is he 3 points lower? And 9 out of 10 Cubans surveyed want Mr. Obama to visit the country. And 4 in 5 want the old cast of Jersey Shore to film the reunion special there. Second part may not be true. Does President Obama have a chance of running for some governmental office in Cuba after he leaves office in the White House? Rick Unger.
That's a big nay, but I'll tell you what it does point out, what we should have known all along, which is the way to turn Cuba was to give them a good dose of American-style free market capitalism. Our plan before was not the way to do it. This is.
Wait, I'd like to ask, how do you do an opinion poll in Cuba?
That's a very good point.
I mean,
yeah, okay, what's your source?
so the government says, okay, let's do this. We want 80%, so they go out and...
Well, but 53% do not like Fidel. And,
That's true.
and,
It couldn't have
right?
been a government thing, 'cause
57
they were
don't like
pretty bad.
Raul.
They should have asked how many Cubans want to leave and go to Miami. And that would
Right.
probably be 99.99% of all Cubans.
There is
I don't
only
know.
so
Have you
many
been there?
rafts to go around.
I haven't,
awesome.
but
It's
I've known
awesome.
Cubans who've escaped from the Castro regime and whose mothers had their gold pulled out of their teeth with
Yeah.
forceps and who were operated on by people who weren't medical doctors. I've heard the horrors of Castro's Cuba.
Interesting. Anyway, next, after Apple released 300 new emojis, including some long-awaited racially diverse emojis, Clorox tweeted, and we got it, new emojis are all right, but where's the bleach? Clorox may have been questioning why a bleach emoji wasn't part of the new rollout, but social media took the tweet out of a totally different context, even thinking Clorox wanted to bleach the new racially diverse emojis white. Yep, everything's about race. And now we're going to cue the apology tweet, and there it is. Wish we could go bleach away our last tweet. Didn't mean to offend. It was meant to be about all the toilet, bathtub, red wine emojis that could use a clean up. And that is your end quote of that tweet. Did Clorox make a mess for itself, Rick Unger? Yay or nay?
Can this be my I don't care for the night?
Yes, it can.
Thank you.
Jane?
No, I mean, I think we've gotten to a point of complete insanity where people are interpreting everything on a racial basis. I don't think it's good for anybody, and I speak as somebody who's Puerto Rican and Irish. Let's let the race go and let's all be human beings for a few minutes.
Yeah.
Very good. I'm Spanish and Irish, by the way.
Oh, really?
Yeah, go figure. We'll grab a
Mucho
drink
gusto.
afterwards. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm not.
Really?
I think this whole thing is completely ridiculous.
Yep, this is just another example, and I'm a nay. Clorox has nothing to apologize for here. This is just social media and racial sensitivity, political correctness run amok. Anyway, how would you like to be the proud new owner of the actual 1977 Trans Am Burt Reynolds drove in Smokey and the Bandit? And the fully restored Trans Am, autographed by the Bandit himself, is set to be auctioned off next week at the Carlisle Auctions in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. So, how much could the car go for? According to Trans Am expert Rick Dieters, museum quality Trans Ams go for around $100,000. And the 77 version from Reynolds, well, that could go for $450,000 as it did last year. So be sure to bring your checkbooks and maybe the deed to your house, or as Rick calls it, tip money. So is the Bandit car worth that much, Mr. Chandler?
Given the potholes in New York at the moment, no.
Good point. Good, but it did clear a bridge in part one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd
So
rather have one of those little cars, those tiny little cars that are like half a car. I don't like that car, but then again, muscle cars aren't for me.
interesting.
Well, it is only tip money, and frankly, I don't have room in my garages for another one.
Wow. See, Rick doesn't apologize for his wealth. That's good stuff. Anyway, there's Turd Ferguson now. I love Reynolds.
If they made it a hybrid, maybe.
Maybe.
A hybrid, really?
Yeah.
It's a
Can you imagine
classic.
back in the day a hybrid?
They got 3 movies out of this. 2 starred Reynolds, and then they made a 3rd one without him, which you don't have
With,
to watch
Reed,
at any
right?
point. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. And was it a monkey? No, the dog. The dog's name was.
Oh gosh, I don't remember.
It's going to come back.
I'm
to
pretty
me.
sure it wasn't Bullet though.
Okay. Godzilla has had a bad rep over the years for destroying any city in its path, but Tokyo is now making the lizard monster a special resident and tourism ambassador, huh? Yep, a giant head about 171 feet tall was built at the Toho office. That's the studio behind the original Godzilla film. Japan is hoping the Godzilla head will bring tourists, as Toho is working on a comeback film for the misunderstood icon. Will this giant, smoky monster head help bring in Taurus, Jane?
You know, I think they're demonizing Godzilla, and I'm very offended by all of this.
Interesting. Rick,
Sure, it's all about race when it comes to Godzilla. I love Godzilla. I'd go see it. Of course, Pac-Man is a much better representation.
10,
of
5
Japan.
seconds.
Godzilla leaves me cold. I'm staying home.
Agreed. Never seen one movie with my wife. By the way, the dog's name was Fred, and I did not Google that while you guys were on camera. Anyway, thanks for tuning in tonight. We'll be back tomorrow night, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm Joe Concha saying, y'all come back now, you hear?